Block 1. Charles Drew Genius. Hello, FullofMind viewers, and welcome to a story that will challenge your understanding of heroism and injustice. Today, we delve into the life of a man whose mind saved millions, but whose skin color subjected him to the very prejudice he fought to overcome with science and reason. We are talking about the incredible, untold story of Dr. Charles Drew, a pioneering African-American surgeon whose brilliance literally changed the course of modern medicine and World War II. To truly grasp the magnitude of his achievement, we have to transport ourselves back to the late 1930s and early 1940s. The world was on the brink of, and then plunged into, a global conflict of unprecedented scale. As armies clashed on battlefields across Europe and the Pacific, one of the most lethal enemies wasn't a bullet or a bomb, but something far more insidious: shock and blood loss. A soldier could survive an initial wound, only to die minutes or hours later because there was no way to replenish the blood they had lost. The logistics were a nightmare. Whole blood was incredibly difficult to store. It required constant refrigeration and expired in about a week. You couldn't just stockpile it and ship it thousands of miles to a field hospital in the heat of battle. This was the deadly equation of warfare, and the Allied forces were desperate for a solution. The call went out for the best and brightest minds to tackle this life-or-death problem. Enter Charles Richard Drew. Born in 1904 in a segregated Washington, D.C., Drew was a gifted scholar and a phenomenal athlete from a young age. He excelled in everything he put his mind to, earning an athletic scholarship to Amherst College. But it was a personal tragedy, the death of his sister from tuberculosis, that ignited his passion for medicine. He was determined to heal, to save lives. Yet, the path for an aspiring African-American doctor in the early 20th century was fraught with obstacles. Many of America's top medical schools simply wouldn't admit black students. Undeterred, Drew looked north to McGill University in Montreal, Canada, where he thrived, finishing second in his class of 137 students. It was at McGill that he first began studying under Dr. John Batty, a bacteriologist who was intensely interested in the problems of blood transfusion and fluid balance. This is where the first seeds of his future genius were planted. After his residency, Drew received a prestigious fellowship to study at Columbia University in New York City, working alongside Dr. John Scudder at the Presbyterian Hospital. Their mission was clear: crack the code of long-term blood preservation. The team was part of an experimental project to establish a blood bank, one of the very first in the United States. Drew quickly became the intellectual engine of the group. He was meticulous, tireless, and brilliant. He began focusing not on whole blood, but on its components. Blood, as you know, isn't just one substance. It's a cocktail of red cells that carry oxygen, white cells that fight infection, platelets that help with clotting, and the liquid that carries it all, plasma. Drew and his team made a critical discovery. While the red blood cells were fragile and required refrigeration, plasma was a golden, resilient liquid. It could be separated, pooled from different donors, and, most importantly, it could be dehydrated, turned into a powder. This was the game changer. Imagine the logistics now. Instead of shipping heavy, fragile, refrigerated bags of whole blood that would expire in days, you could now ship lightweight, sealed tins of plasma powder. At a field hospital, a medic just needed to add sterilized water, and within minutes, they had a life-saving fluid ready for transfusion. This reconstituted plasma couldn't replace the oxygen-carrying red blood cells for long, but it could restore a wounded soldier's blood volume, preventing fatal shock and buying them the precious time needed to get to a full surgical unit. Dr. Drew's doctoral thesis, titled Banked Blood: A Study in Blood Preservation, was a masterpiece of medical research. It compiled all the known data, refined the techniques for processing and storing plasma, and essentially wrote the instruction manual for the modern blood bank. He had found the answer. His work was a medical miracle, a breakthrough that would redefine emergency medicine forever. And it came not a moment too soon. In 1940, as the Nazi Blitz rained bombs down on London, Great Britain was in desperate need of blood and plasma. They needed a way to get it across the Atlantic. They needed a system. They needed a genius. They needed Dr. Charles Drew. Block 2. Blood Segregation Scandal. At the height of his scientific triumph, having authored the definitive guide to blood banking, Dr. Charles Drew was appointed the medical director of the Blood for Britain project. This was a massive, unprecedented humanitarian effort to collect blood from American donors, process it into plasma using his revolutionary techniques, and ship it overseas to save the lives of British soldiers and civilians. Drew was the perfect man for the job. He designed the entire system from the ground up. The donor stations, the sterile collection methods, the processing labs, the transport vehicles, every single step was meticulously planned and executed under his supervision. He created a river of life that flowed across an ocean. The project was a staggering success, delivering thousands of units of plasma and proving that large-scale, long-distance blood banking was not just possible but highly effective. When the United States officially entered World War II after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. military and the American Red Cross knew exactly who to turn to. They asked Dr. Drew to replicate his success on an even grander scale as the director of the first American Red Cross blood bank. He was a national hero. His work was indispensable to the war effort. He was responsible for a system that would ultimately save hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives. And it is right here, at the absolute pinnacle of his career, that this story of scientific brilliance collides head-on with the brutal, irrational, and deeply ingrained reality of American racism. As he was setting up the National Blood Donation Program, Dr. Drew was given a directive that was as unscientific as it was insulting. The U.S. military, and by extension the American Red Cross, mandated that the blood of white donors be segregated from the blood of black donors. Let that sink in for a moment. The world's foremost expert on blood, the man who knew more about its properties and preservation than perhaps anyone alive, was being told that the very substance he had mastered had to be separated based on the skin color of the person it came from. From a scientific standpoint, this was utter madness. There is absolutely no difference between the blood of people from different racial backgrounds. Blood types A, B, AB, O are what matter for transfusion, and these types are present in all human populations. The concept of black blood or white blood is a biological fiction, a dangerous myth rooted in the pseudoscientific eugenics and white supremacy movements of the era. Dr. Drew knew this better than anyone. He was a man of science, of facts, of empirical evidence. He immediately and forcefully protested this policy, calling it a stupid blunder. He wrote letters, he gave interviews, he used his considerable platform to argue against this discriminatory and deeply un-American policy. He stated unequivocally that the blood of an individual is not determined by the color of their skin. The irony was staggering and the personal insult was profound. Here was Dr. Charles Drew, a brilliant African-American surgeon, designing the system that would save American soldiers of all races. Yet, under this policy, his own blood, the blood of the program's creator, would be labeled as different, as separate, as inferior. The Red Cross, under immense pressure, initially tried to bar African Americans from donating blood altogether. After a massive public outcry, they amended the policy to the compromise of segregation. They would accept the blood, but it had to be stored and administered separately. Imagine the psychological toll this must have taken on Dr. Drew. Every day, he went to work perfecting a life-saving process while simultaneously being confronted by a system that devalued him and his entire race. He was in an impossible position. He was the public face of a program that was both a scientific marvel and a monument to social injustice. He had to champion the cause of blood donation while fighting the very institution he was leading. This wasn't just a professional disagreement, it was a deep, personal, and ethical crisis. His work was about the fundamental shared humanity of our biology, that a pint of blood from one person could save any other, regardless of background.
The policy of segregation was a direct assault on that truth. It was a poison injected into the heart of his life's work, a cruel paradox that saw his genius celebrated while his identity was condemned.
Block 3. Drew Legacy Racism. Faced with this unbearable contradiction, Dr. Charles Drew made a courageous and principled stand. He could not, in good conscience, continue to lead an organization that upheld a policy so fundamentally at odds with scientific truth and human dignity. In 1942, after having successfully established the national blood banking system that would serve the entire country throughout the war, he resigned from his position as director of the American Red Cross Blood Bank. This act of protest was a powerful statement against institutional racism. He chose his integrity over a prestigious title, refusing to be a silent partner in a discriminatory system, even if it was one he had built. He had given the nation the tools to save its soldiers, but he would not endorse the lie that the value of that gift depended on the race of the giver. After leaving the Red Cross, Dr. Drew returned to his first loves, surgery and teaching. He became the chief of surgery at Freedman's Hospital in Washington, D.C., and a professor at Howard University. Here, he dedicated himself to another monumental task, training the next generation of African American surgeons. He was a legendary teacher, demanding, brilliant, and deeply inspiring. He fought tirelessly against the racist policies of institutions like the American Medical Association, which often barred black doctors from membership and advanced training. He saw it as his mission not just to be an exceptional surgeon, but to create opportunities for others, to break down the barriers that he had faced his entire life. He famously said, "Excellence of performance will transcend artificial barriers." He believed that by training black doctors to be so undeniably skilled, the walls of segregation would have no choice but to crumble. In many ways, this became the second great act of his life, building a legacy not of plasma, but of people. He mentored dozens of young surgeons who would go on to become leaders in their fields, carrying his torch of excellence and advocacy forward. Tragically, Dr. Drew's life was cut short. In 1950, at the age of just 45, he was driving with colleagues through North Carolina to attend a medical conference. He fell asleep at the wheel and the car crashed. He was gravely injured. For decades, a persistent and bitter myth surrounded his death, that he was denied a life-saving blood transfusion by a whites-only hospital and bled to death. While this story powerfully symbolized the very racism he fought against, the historical record shows it to be untrue. The surviving doctors who were with him confirmed that the white physicians at the nearby hospital did everything they could to save him. His injuries were simply too catastrophic. The sad irony is that the myth was so believable because it was so plausible. It spoke to a deeper truth about the lethal nature of American segregation. Today, the legacy of Dr. Charles Drew is everywhere, even if his name is not as well known as it should be. Every time someone receives a blood transfusion, every time a blood mobile parks in a community, every time a modern blood bank processes and stores units of life-saving blood, they are using the fundamental principles and techniques that he developed. His work is the bedrock of modern transfusion medicine. But his other legacy, his moral legacy, is just as powerful. His story is a stark and uncomfortable reminder of how systemic racism can infect even the most noble of human endeavors. It forces us to ask difficult questions. How many other brilliant minds have been stifled or ignored because of prejudice? How do we ensure that science and medicine serve all of humanity equally? Dr. Charles Drew's life was a profound testament to the power of a single individual to change the world, but it also stands as an enduring indictment of a society that, while desperately needing his genius, refused to see his full humanity. His story is not just history, it is a lesson, a warning, and an inspiration that echoes to this very day.